Wow, what an amazing day. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kennedy Odede. I'm the founder and the CEO of Shining of Communities, SHOFCO, or a movement that improves the dignity, physical well-being, and opportunity of urban slum dwellers throughout the country. I grew up in Kibera, Africa's largest slum, and I knew in my community that if we come together, we can solve our own problems. So, I'm really so happy. I'm so excited to be here today with my community from Madare. And I know everyone is watching around the world. Today, SHOFCO is impacting over 2.4 million slum dwellers across 17 slums in Kenya. SHOFCO is on front line of the COVID-19 response in Kenya urban slums, delivering healthcare, wash, food relief, and economic stability at scale. I am so excited to be here today as the host of the World Communities Forum, joining you from the rooftop of SHOFCO's Health Clinic here in Madare, Kenya. I want to thank you, all of you, for joining virtually, and I'm so excited to be joined by our community leaders who are here today. So, where did this idea of World Community Forum come from? After attending elite conferences focused on solving world problems, I had a vision for a new kind of space where those closest to the problems are recognized as being best positioned to solve their problem. The idea of World Communities Forum was to spark a localization revolution that lets marginalized communities drive change. My dream was to have this event with everyone together in person in one of the Nairobi's urban slums, but we have to do this now because of COVID, which means we have to come together virtually. So why are we here today? The urgency to build a more humane and sustainable future has never been greater. The pandemic has accelerated historic levels of inequality and threatened social progress around the world. Communities discover better solutions and have the trust to deliver better results. This is a fact, and we have seen this during COVID. From Madare, Kibera, to Mumbai, to Nepal, to Delaware, Brazil, and to London. Community-led solutions work. Why do they remain under-recognized and under-resourced? We have to change this. This is a huge problem. We must immediately shift this balance to ensure an equitable post-COVID recovery and get back on towards the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, our future of our future. So I want to tell you 3 ways that World Communities Forum is different from other events. I know you are wondering, what's the difference? What's unique about this? Number 1, grassroots leaders designed our program from the bottom up. We worked with local to design our program. For me, that's unique. That's working with leaders on the ground. The second one is the forum of its kind. This forum is of its kind, and it's the first of its kind to started globally, whereby global development event that flips the dynamics on the global elite. So I mean, the forum is a first of its kind global development event that flips the dynamics on the global elite. Most of the time, we don't invite those who are really solving the problem to be on the table. They don't get. So then how can we solve their problems? That's unique. The third one for me is we are amplifying the voices of local leaders on the front lines of marginalized, pairing our grassroots leaders with high-profile voices like Chelsea Clinton, Darren Walker, Cecile Richards, who are playing the role of active listeners to help our message be amplified. This has not been done before. And I'm so excited to share the amazing work of our world. As I've said before, grassroots leaders have played a vital role in all things World Communities Forum. But today and tomorrow, at one moment in time, we must continue the work and the momentum. So today we are publicly launching something important that we have been building for the past year, the Global Alliance for Communities. The Global Alliance for Communities is a coalition of 160 approximate leaders stretching across the globe, working on front lines of the world's most pressing challenges. These are people who are really doing the work on the ground, and we are still growing every day. The Global Alliance will drive targeted actions to end racial disparities in development and shift policy and funding towards a more that values community-based leaders who are often, honestly, are people of color. Our work is just the beginning and will be informed by the events of the next 2 days. I'm really excited. So today, the Global Alliance has a message for the world. This is the message. We call upon the IMF, World Bank, G7, G20, public sector funders, private philanthropists, civil society organizations, and local government networks to invest in localization revolution that is embedded into all global and national recovery strategies. During the program, you will see more of the policy ask we have crafted together. If you are a community-based leader, please consider an open invitation for you to join. Up next, our program will begin with a spotlight on the Global Alliance that we have built so far and the inspiring leaders involved. Then I will have a conversation with Ambassador Samantha Power, where she will lend us a powerful voice to the grassroots movement. And from there, we move to some of our big conversations and grassroots spotlights. And of course, some special visit from our live viewing stations where community solutions are being implemented. Today and tomorrow, you will see an Alliance founding member, Hamzat Lawal, from Connected Development at a live viewing station in Abuja, Nigeria. Then, at the end of both days, we are going to partner with some fantastic leaders to build collaborative workshops, and we want your voices be heard within. If you haven't already signed up, please, can you join via the chat at the end of the day? The World Communities Forum is an expression of community. Grassroots leaders on the front lines. Your work matters. Everyone else who is here today is an ally. As you watch the program, I ask you to think about how can you personally contribute to moving this agenda forward. Okay, enough from me now. Let's move on and let's get fun. I'll be back at the end of the program before we break up for our workshops to wrap up all we have had today and ensure we hear from you all. Let's go.
We're talking about problems that exist in our communities and our areas, but the problems are actually across the continent. And we need to work together, identifying where there are similar problems and sharing those solutions and working better across boundaries.
We constructed a center in the nearby village where refugees and Malawians could walk and access activities that we provide. Once a refugee and a Malawian meet together, they learn together, they become friends, they create allies.
Once you sit down with an individual household, you learn more of what is the reason that they are in that situation, other than the normal project where people are brought together in large numbers.
Whenever we discuss the issues to do with children and young people, how do we become inclusive, especially talking about children with disabilities? How do we keep reminding ourselves of reaching more to children with disabilities?
What has tended to be forgotten is the issue of child mothers, young women who are already child mothers. There are some countries where the policy is very clear that they are not to return to school. What do we do with these girls? We are forcing them into poverty. We are forcing their children into poverty. So we've got to look at economic empowerment of this particular very vulnerable group of young women.
I believe I am raising strong queens, but I also don't want to raise strong queens for broken kings.
Hi, everybody. I'm Samantha Power. I had the privilege of serving as Barack Obama's ambassador to the United Nations, representing the United States, of course, and have been nominated recently by President Joe Biden to run USAID. And I'm awaiting, I'm hopeful that that will happen at some point and that I will get through Senate confirmation and be in a position to run the world's largest development agency. But in so doing, if I have the chance to do so, one of the people that I will take inspiration from and will learn from is our special guest today, the CEO of the Shining Hope for Communities, Kennedy Odede. And Kennedy, it's great to be with you. As you know, USAID is a massive agency with programs and people fanned out all around the world. There's a big debate in global aid right now about localization and about the importance of ensuring that it is grassroots engagement, activism, programming that drives development in communities, because that'll make it much more sustainable. When you're building programs that are going to benefit your neighbors, people you grew up with, the motivation is different. And the connections and the ability to enlist large communities and vast array of stakeholders is obviously much greater than when it's an outsider coming in and seeking to make a difference. So I'd love to dig into all of that with you. But before we do, I'd love our audience to know where you come from and how you got involved in the very communities where you grew up and put this kind of now jargony word localization into effect. What's your local? Where did you come from and how'd you get into this?
Thank you so much, Ambassador. First of all, for giving us the opportunity and believing in the power of community in the grassroots. So I'm happy to have you. And I one thing about you that many things that I love that during Ebola outbreak, you really played a very strong role on ensuring, and you admire how communities were coming together to fight Ebola. So I remember that about you. So thank you. Anyway, so I come from Kibera slum, and I grew up in that poverty. And as a very early age, I have to run away from the house and be a homeless kid at the age of 10. And I saw what it means when things cannot go down. So there I gave up on my life. And then one day I got a book from a priest, and I learned a story about this man called Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I'm like, wow. I always think about myself, of poor, and this guy was about community, honestly. So anyway, at around age 15, I went back to my community and I started becoming organizer. And the idea that if we come together, we can solve our own problems. But Ambassador, it was tough because you are told what's the data, what do you know, where you're educated, and nobody wants to listen to us. But somehow I got lucky, I got American scholarships, I came to the state. So that's why my life became different. So up to then, I believe that for real change to happen, you have to involve people living there. You know, they're the one near the problem, so they can solve it better. Most of the time, Ambassador, they get forgotten. So that's why I came to this idea of why can we bring in people together, those leaders, to have one voice. So Shofco now serves over 2.4 million people. We have really just grown from a soccer ball. I remember for Dr. King was a small church. For me, it was a small soccer ball. But people love football and soccer ball in my community. That became the drive. And when community are in, oh my God, you see that magic. Yes, that's my story.
That sort of scratches the surface. I want to dig in a little more if I can. So just knowing that people who are joining us today come from all walks of life, all stratas, all parts of the world, perhaps. Could you say a little bit more about what, you said I grew up in a slum and I was a homeless kid, and that's shorthand for you for an awful lot. Could you just unpack that a little bit? I mean, what were the conditions like then? And what were the kinds of issues that you dealt with as a child that you now work on day to day?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think I'm doing what I'm doing because of that life experience and knowing that no one will be there for you and being judgmented. You are being told you are poor. A community hospital in this area. You know what I mean? And then Ambassador, women, my mom, I love my mom. She's still alive and she never went to school. I think she always thinks if she went to school, she could be the ambassador too. That's what she would say that about us, you know? So my mom, really poor woman, got married at the age of 16. Had no hope, went through violence. And in my community, women were being beaten. And she taught me gender equity at a very early age. And and if you go to school in the slum, then you see more boys than girls. And I said to myself, one day, we're going to have our school for women in this community. So right now, we're going to have a school in this community, you know. So that really gives me think, why is it possible? I think, Ambassador, is because I grew up there. I listen, I passed through it. But the challenge we are facing is that people are not willing to listen. You already judge them. They're uneducated. They don't know what they want. They say that. They don't understand the data. They are wrong. If you really, something I call it community buy-in. Honestly, that's the most powerful. You can go to Harvard, Yale, Wesleyan, but with your ideas, you can sit in DC, but when you come to implement them, if there's no community buy-in, nothing happens. So I went through that live experience. And even Ambassador, I give another example, is during this COVID, for example, really shocked me a lot because there is a disconnect. They're telling us, wear mask, stay away, and don't go out. Ambassador, believe me, they forgot that people were living in 10 by 10 room where there's no fridge. They share one pizza train with other 50 families, and nobody's listening to them. So they feel like, do they really understand what's happening? And I met women who are telling me, Kennedy, I better die from corona than dying from hunger. I mean, so what does that mean? It means that there is no connection. So my role has been really trying to bring these voices. I really want to give credit to my government, honestly. I sat on the task force for COVID-19, and I brought these ideas up. And we're able now to start rolling it out. We set up what's called hand washing stations. Why is it possible? Because we brought the voices of the locals to the decision makers. Yeah.
Could I actually stay on COVID for a second, just because, again, everyone watching has their own COVID experience, regardless of where they're watching from. And I've been very struck by the disconnect between public health pronouncements and the lives of people living in very close quarters, whether in Kibera or in
refugees.
other parts of the world. I mean, even of course, in parts of the United States as well. Prisons, for example, and some inner city communities, maybe not as closely packed, but very difficult to adhere to the guidelines, even if you want to. You mentioned your mother marrying young, and you've made such an investment in girls' education and sought to bring support to that sector all around the world. Because of COVID, you've seen girls give up their studies and enter marriage much earlier than they had intended to. And so you see, I think it's something like 1.3 billion kids not able to attend school. Some of them get to do so remotely, but many don't have access to the technology. And then, putting even the public health dimension of COVID to one side, you just see the economic fallout. And so even though I gather in your community, people have made the choice to continue to try to still work, it's much harder to do that when the global economy is shut down and when economic conditions are deteriorating all across your country and all across the continent and all around the world. So I wonder if you could that's the sort of macro picture that one reads about. I wonder if you could just describe what understanding that these choices that your neighbors are being forced into are impossible choices. What has COVID done to the development gains that you've been making? Has it been a big blow, or has this community resilience been able to mitigate some of the damage? Could you just talk a little bit about the latest in your community and how people are doing?
Yeah, so this is very interesting, Ambassador. So first of all, when this thing hit the world, and in Kenya especially, is a place whereby if you are poor, I don't know about America, if you are poor, you lose trust with your government. Why are you poor? See? So when they did this COVID, they were like, no, that is a propaganda. You see? And then later on, the government just want money from developed world, for the World Bank. They believe that, I swear to you. So they really didn't connect to it. So, and then they hear all these things that have been said that doesn't make sense to them. So I have to go back to the community and talk to them. And then they're like, but Kennedy, we thought this is a white man disease. You know what I mean? It's only those who it's not for Africa. I'm like, no. So you see that this COVID, honestly, for me, is an eye opener. It has removed a cobweb for us to see reality. It is not equalizer. It has just shown us, the ambassador, that how our system need to be really mended. It has shown us our nakedness. I won't lie to you, I'm so sad to see what's happening in America and in Canada, which I see we care about the world, globalization, but now it's becoming nationalism, whereby people just really taking so much. So they forget about this country. So the same thing happening on the ground, whereby people who are really poor are suffering. They were drivers, chefs, cooks, nannies. Because their job was face-to-face, they lost it. It was so tough. And then there's something called, which is so sad, happened to us, discrimination. Kibera, the Slavs are, no, don't go there. They have it, so don't employ them. That was really tough, you know what I mean? And so this people really went through a lot. So then where does the solution come in? So I have to talk to the community. What do we do? I told the government and the private sector, they say they'll wear the mask. They say they will try their best. It is all about dignity. It is all about basic needs. They don't have food. Okay? It's the result of the government to provide food. So the government tried to bring in water in, and really amazing to bring in. So I talked the government to another private sector, brought in something called cash transfer. It worked. They want to build the economy. And what I love about communities is that they love themselves. Nobody want to die. They don't want to kill their neighbors. You know what I mean? So when you give them that tool and support, they'll do it. They don't need science for that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I really saw that what happened. But I still have some worry as we get vaccine to these countries. We have seen what's happening in the developed countries. I'm scared that we might end up having the poor people not get it, or having what's called the vaccine black market, where you can get fake one. Because when something is, you give a chance for corruption and people to make up fake stuff because it's not there. So I think that's why we need also community to come out together to help them. How do we work on this? Because this cannot be done on just sitting on a table, on a high table somewhere. Yeah.
That's really helpful and really interesting, and especially the question of trust. You mentioned at the outset Ebola and what we did in the Obama administration on Ebola.
Yes. Yeah.
That was the sort of gating issue, was trust and the lack of trust. In rural Guinea, the absolute lack of trust for the central authorities. So when the central authorities said there's Ebola, you have to do safe burial, you have to get tested. They just wanted to do the opposite of what the central government said, because that's what they had learned over time. And I will say in the United States, which is, we have so many more resources and infrastructure, and we're so privileged. We're having this conversation from me from a point of a vantage point of great privilege, but it's trust that has, made us put us in the horrible situation that we're in, where more than 500,000 people have died of COVID. That did not need to happen, but it was a lack of trust of science, a lack of trust of one another, a lack of trust of the other political party. And it's just devastating to see the human consequences of the erosion of trust. And it's why someone like you, as a messenger, I don't even know if we want to call it a data gatherer, but an experience, as an amalgamator of the experiences of people in your community, being that vehicle where you're trusted by your community, but you've also managed to build up so much trust, with your government interlocutors. That bridging role is essential. Let me ask you a little bit about what I touched upon at the outset and what you've been very adamant about on, which is again what I think is a little bit jargony. This idea of localization. It's almost like saying humanization. Yes, we should. What does local mean? I mean, local just means the place. The place where communities are living and where people long to exercise agency. You mentioned dignity. Dignity can be about means and about having enough food, but it's also about exercising your voice and being heard and being seen. I'm new, to some aspects of the development conversation, in the sense that I worked on humanitarian emergencies and on geopolitics and other dimensions of foreign policy. And a lot of what USAID does, I have worked on, but some of these questions, for example, of cash transfers versus other forms of programming, are ones that I'm digging into now in a very deep way. And I wonder if you could just offer a perspective on international development programming, how you have seen over the life of your career, the debates evolve, the approach evolve. I know it hasn't evolved enough from your standpoint, so say a little again about what's left to do. And of course, what's in my mind is this idea of a much more bottom-up approach, of much more support for local actors like yours. What are the tensions in that? What stands in the way, do you think, still at this point? But tell us just what you've seen in terms of how things have changed over your career.
Yes, I honestly, Ambassador, I see there's a lot of hope. I'm a man of hope. I see the future is really getting better, because if you think about, we never used to have this kind of discussion. People were scared to talk about the fact. Truth be told, there is a little bit of colonial mentality in development. You know what I mean? We could talk about that 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You know what I mean? But now, because of the Black Lives Matter, what's happening around the world, COVID was interesting, because COVID also proved to us that community were there supporting each other. Then why can't we invest on them? You know what I mean? So what I'm going to work on is called decolonizing development. You know what I mean? Believing that a dollar will go farther along the way when you invest it to somebody who is living the experience. Okay? So that's the thing I know. And then there's a lot of terms called capacity building, scalability. What is scalability? I believe in scale. But you cannot just use it as a way to deny people of color or Africans who are really doing amazing work and there's an impact. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying. So I see this kind of this colonial mentality that has to stop. And for that to happen, Ambassador, you are amazing. How will it happen that people like you talk to us? That's how we're gonna try to bridge this gap. You know what I mean? We need to hear more voices. We're used to the same voices. You know what I mean? And even in the US, as you can see, during all this thing, we see more people of color suffering more compared even who run the organizations compared to their fellow. So yeah, so the first thing is to accept there's a problem. So let's say I'm the one running something big. So I'll be like, okay, do we believe in rural, do we believe in grassroots movements? Yes. Then why are we not supporting them? Okay, we start from we start digging from there. What is happening? I want to know what's happening. Why are we not supporting them? And then why can we not support them? If you remember, Ambassador, during colonization, they used the word, no, African countries cannot manage themselves. We have to colonize them. So they will tell you the same thing. No, they don't understand the data. Then they don't understand this. So we're like, no way. If we want real change, we have to be radical on it. We have to listen to those voices. That's why I'm so happy to hear the voices of over 150 young leaders across the globe who are joining us to talk about their voices, to be heard, and to see how we can bring this systematical change in our communities.
And so the debate is happening in a different way and in more mainstream circles and with fewer inhibitions now than 5 years ago, like you said.
Yes.
What you talked about COVID not being an equalizer, as it has been spoken about, but rather being, and I feel like this is the best phrase, capital G, capital R, the great revealer, right?
Yeah, the great revealer.
The great revealer, I mean, not great in a positive sense, but just exposing the disparities and inequities and injustices and just shining a brighter spotlight and having the human toll be much more out in front. At the same time, in many communities, it has brought out tremendous solidarity. And I wonder if you could speak about sort of the bright spots in your community, the kinds of things that you think can be scaled or the things that we can take out of, and it need not be over the course of the pandemic, but in general, what can people like me who don't live in Kibera learn from the energy and commitment and successes of people in your community? What are the bright spots?
Yes, so I think one of them is the resiliency is amazing. These people don't give up. I'm like, wow, despite all this, they want to carry each other. And something that I've seen that happened through COVID is the government of Kenya were willing to listen more. So now they're building roads. We talked to them. They came in like, wow, this is what, so without COVID, I'm sorry to say this, it still they could never care about it. But now because of COVID, it really became attention. Now they know there's no roads, there's no sewage, there are all these things. The government, President Uhuru Kenyatta is now building more health centers in the slums that I think will never happen without COVID. And another thing that for me, that's very powerful. So we have also seen the inequality that was existing. You also see during COVID, Ambassador, people became billionaires. So the gap is big, and we have seen that we are not equal. And we never talked about it until COVID. So this for me has really brought a lot of conversation that we have to start action on them. And the last one is, did communities around the world who are local organizations, local leaders, did something amazing? Yes. So for me, if you're looking for data, that's the real data now. They did it. When big organizations were running away because of COVID, they were scared. They were all going back to their countries. You know what I mean? Locals keep on working hard, and they did it. And we should recognize that, and we should support them because they did it. Yeah,
that's great, Kennedy. Well, we're wrapping up here, and I just want to thank you for all the work you do, all the inspiration you give to so many, not only for what you do for the people of your community, but how you inspire change in other communities, how other local leaders learn from you, how people like me learn from you. Even here in the United States, we now are doing something with our recent Recovery Act that nobody thought possible, which is actually give families who have children support. And it's actually incredible that for the first time, we're going to see a mother, a low-income person get $300 a month because they have a child under 6. And if they have 3 children under 6, they'll get $900 a month for the next year. And so I think everybody has a chance out of this horrific crisis to experiment, to see people who've been left behind and have been and felt unseen for too long. And I think you and your community are showing the way. So I'm so grateful to talk to you now of all times, and I look forward to working together going forward.
Yes. And Ambassador, I cannot wait to have you meet my communities and come to Kenya. We look forward for that. And I'll see you when they come to DC. So I'm so happy. And thank you so much for doing the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to our conversation today. I want to thank my dear friend, Kennedy Odede, for inviting me to be part of the World Communities Forum and for giving me the honor of helping to moderate our conversation today with three extraordinary women. And before we turn to talking about the fundamental ways in which COVID-19 has disproportionately affected women and girls around the world, I want to give each of these phenomenal women the chance to introduce themselves. You can hear from each of them in their own words about their work with their local communities and with our broader global community. And so I'm just going to go around kind of the boxes on our shared screen as we're in kind of virtual space, but actual community together today. So Adjoa, I just want to ask you, since you're kind of next to me on the screen, if you could kind of introduce yourself and share a little bit about your work with Forward, and also kind of really the extraordinary expansiveness of your work with communities across the globe.
Hello, everyone. As Chelsea has said, my name is Adjoa Kwasi Nkluviche. My title is Head of Global Advocacy and Partnerships for the Foundation for Women's Health Research and Development, Forward. Forward is an African women's-led organization. We've been in existence since '85. We registered in '85. And we initially started working focused solely on female genital mutilation. But we quickly realized that it doesn't occur in isolation. And over the years, we've included in our remit child marriage and other forms of violence against women and girls. So that's what Forward does.
Thank you. And Winnie, moving to you again, just sort of going clockwise around the screen, could you please tell us about kind of an organization that you founded, Teen Seed Africa, and kind of your work with kind of your local community, and also really similar to Adjoa, your broader work as well.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Winnie Obure, and I'm founder and director of Teen Seed Africa. This is a community-based organization that works with adolescent girls and young women on sexual reproductive health issues. We work on economic empowerment and sexual violence, trying to prevent and respond to sexual violence. And I'll tell you just a very small story. So I know a girl who was defiled from the age 10. And the worst of it all was when she was about 15, she got defiled by a very close family friend, and got pregnant, was forced to abort the next year. And this girl dropped out of school because this perpetrator, the defiler, wanted her to continue exchanging sex for her education. And so at Form 3, the third year in high school, she decided this is enough. She can't take it anymore. And she won't pay the price of education with her body. But I'm very happy because today, that girl is me. I went through that, but I don't regret it at all. And like many other girls are going through the same things, I founded Teen Seed as a teen, which is teen and seed, to look at teenagers as seeds of greatness, to look at them as solutions in the community, to be able to rise from the violence and give hope to many other women and girls in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Winnie. And Bianca, please, you actually have started and been involved in a number of organizations related to women's health and women's rights in Brazil. So could you please share about your work kind of with your local community and again, more broadly?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm a journalist here in Brazil, and I'm a member of UNEAFRO. We offer popular education in 40 different centers in Black and poor communities in Brazil. And when we invite people to learn, they don't learn only Portuguese or mathematics, but also politics and human rights. And we can create possibilities and opportunities together, especially for girls and women. We have a project called Obara, focused on supporting girls in continuing studying, even with the pressure they receive for focusing on domestic work or in the productive work for bringing money home. But in our work, in 12 years, we see many women going to the university, to better jobs, to the Black and feminist movements, and they come back later to teach at UNEAFRO too. So this is a very powerful cycle, and I'm proud to be part of this cycle.
You know, for I think all of us kind of on the screen and probably everyone who is joining us today, we're all aware that while, or I suspect we're all aware, that while we have been kind of living through the COVID-19 pandemic over the last year, kind of how we've been living through it is heavily dependent on where we live, on the leadership that we have for those of us who are living under Bolsonaro in Brazil or who were living under Donald Trump in the United States until very recently, kind of the deeply painful consequences of having nationally elected leaders who were dismissive of the virus, dismissive of the even derisive toward kind of the basic public health measures to help protect people and save lives. The dismissiveness toward science, towards facts and evidence. We also know that our relative levels of privilege and kind of economic status have deeply correlated to our relative risk of acquiring the virus and our relative likelihood to be able to survive the virus if we do become infected. And yet one of the truisms everywhere in the world is that COVID-19 has fallen most heavily on women. Fallen most heavily on women in terms of burden of disease, and fallen most heavily on women in terms of kind of the burden around the burden of disease, the additional child work, the additional homework, the additional kind of caring for those who may be sick with COVID-19 or actually kind of unwell from other reasons and are not able to access the healthcare that they would be not able to do so in non-pandemic times. And so, I know that one of the hopes for this conversation, now that we've heard from, our extraordinary panelists, kind of their backgrounds, is to really give each of them the chance to talk about how COVID-19 has affected women and girls in their communities. And so I want to start there, and then I want to move toward where there are points of optimism and what has been working to help protect women and girls, what has been working to help still empower and support and give agency to women and girls. And yet I think before we can move to that second part, we do have to have some space to hear from all three of you as to what has been the effects of COVID-19 on women and girls in the last year. So Adjoa, again, if we could start with you. So Adjoa, we'll start with you and then again go to Winnie and Bianca.
Okay. We don't know what the full impact of COVID is yet, but the signs are there. It is clear that COVID has had a huge impact on mental health. That's one of the issues that's coming up. And of course, the mental health of women and girls trying to hold families together, trying to manage looking after elderly, sick, affected family members with long COVID, women who are working in the health industry, because as you know, we find more women working face-to-face in nursing, and caring professions. The other thing we do know about COVID is that violence has gone through the roof, and that is in every country. The reports of violence in the homes has been phenomenal, and women who've not been able to get out are still stuck. So we as Forward did a research early on in the pandemic to try to identify some of the issues and what there were the triggers and the findings. And it was anxiety was the first, fear of your loved ones getting COVID, and the economic burden, because people were losing jobs, women also working, low paid, 0-hour contracts, those kind of things. So the impact of COVID definitely has been disproportionately falling on women, and they are bearing the burden. I mean, women never cease to amaze me. We still continue to rise. We'll come back to the issue about the positives maybe later and the opportunities, but that's what we are finding. We're also finding that, and I'm sure Winnie will bear me out, we are hearing stories from Tanzania and Uganda of huge increases in teenage pregnancy because of a lot of child and forced marriages, huge increases in abortions, not properly conducted abortions from Uganda. So we know the lessons from Ebola, and I think we're going to see huge impacts. And I'll stop here.
Well, and Winnie, please, the same question to you as to what kind of you've seen the impact of COVID-19 in your communities, in your work in Kenya, especially focused on younger women, on teenagers, the issues that, the challenges Adjoa you reference, and also the disrupted schooling. I mean, we know that for the 1.7 billion students around the world, it has disrupted almost every student's learning everywhere. And yet we know, again, it's been most disruptive for girls. We know that in many countries, even as schools are reopening, families are keeping their girls at home more frequently. So please, kind of anything that you will share, we very much want to hear, especially kind of what you're seeing the effects are for younger women and girls.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. Like Adjoa said, the world haven't seen yet the full impact of COVID-19. They're still in it, and each and every day you keep finding lots of issues, especially at the community level. Like at TIDSEED, we have experienced a lot of sexual violence, especially on the young women and girls. We have many numbers of adolescent girls who are pregnant as a result of this period because they are not going to school. And as we know, school really helps girls to just hide away from perpetrators who see them as sex objects. So we've had a number of them dropping out of school because even when the schools were reopened, most of them didn't go back to school, either because the parents lost their jobs and they weren't able to pay school fee, or they're pregnant, or some of them got married, and so it's very complicated. We have seen so many girls who have come to us and said, I was forced to have sex with someone to buy sanitary towels. We have a lot of the women and young women, especially, who say they had to trade sex with food, because when the curfews came and all the restrictions and the lockdown, you're wondering, how do you lock down people who are living in an informal settlement, really, without clean, we don't even want to go to clean, but water, just water. Without food, they don't have jobs. Most of the women we work with depend on casual jobs. They want to go to Isili or Buruburu to wash clothes. But now, because of COVID, you aren't able to go to someone's house, and you're forced to literally go hungry. So we had a lot of people who were just saying, I just need food. Okay, like I don't know what's coming next. But as a result, so we've had girls who are now even not going to school because they have to be able to finish the journey, which you're looked at. There's increased stigmatization, right? Because you're a young girl and you're pregnant, all the girls' side and not even on the men who continue to perpetrate these girls. We've had issues like during that lockdown, people who are living with HIV are able to get their medication. The issue of security, women are pregnant and they can't even access a clinic beyond a certain time. And so you wonder, I mean, COVID, they're like essential services, but in the planning, women are not put at the center. So you realize that in most of our needs, or the needs of young women and girls we work with, were not captured in. And so you don't get diapers for the babies. There's no sanitary towels. There's no, you don't have money to even get a taxi to go to hospital at night. And it was embarrassing, that even now in 2021, we're still struggling to get food, something as basic as food, sanitary towels. Yeah. And so a lot of violence also increased because you find, I would say that in the month of April alone, we had more than 15 girls who were just coming to look for safety. They're like, I've been abused either by the dad, the stepfathers, the uncles, or neighbors, and you don't know where to take them because we do not even have enough safe houses in Nairobi. And honestly, the whole of Kenya, we only have one government-run safe house in Makueni County. And so we rely on other women who are opening their doors to support other women who are running for safe survivors of sexual violence. And it's sad because we even had as young as 6 years old girl that was held by the stepdad, and you're wondering, so what happens to this? Among other things that have been also happening at the community level is, we talk about the COVID and you are expected to wear a mask, you're expected to wash your hands all the time, and you don't even have that money to buy a mask. You do not have water in the first place. The only water you are able to get is a 20-liter jerry can, which you want to use probably to drink or to cook. Yeah, so that has been really crazy. Also, that has led transactional sex to be on the high, with, of course, the risk of HIV and AIDS. I'll stop there.
Oh, Winnie, well, thank you for sharing all of that. As painful as it is, I think it's really important that people hear that. And Bianca, now turning to you, you mentioned that kind of through UNE Afro Brazil, you work in kind of more than 40 sites. You're also a journalist. You have been involved in other kind of feminist organizations that you've helped start or kind of worked with. So from these very different kind of complementary perspectives, can you share kind of what you've seen to be the impact of COVID-19 on women and girls in Brazil to be?
Yes. People are hungry here in Brazil, very hungry. And I see a very beautiful communitary organization of women and girls for taking care of all people. So Luana Vieira is a woman, a Black woman of Jardim Miriam in the south zone of São Paulo, and she cooks every day for 200 people for 1 year. And she do this with the communitary support. And also Vanessa Nascimento and Thais Santos, they organize distributing food for many people. And in this year, she has distributed more than 200,000 kilos of food here in São Paulo. So the government has abandoned people for dying here in Brazil. I know you are seeing this in this news. This is terrible because more than 200,000 people have died by COVID here. But people are organized, and at UNEAFRO, girls and women are working in a project called Agentes Populares de Saúde. In resume, popular health agents, girls and women, they are working together with doctors, psychologists, journalists too, because I work with them in this project, and in 5 different places here. and they monitors people with symptoms of COVID. So they register the information about people and call them once, twice, or 3 times a day, depending on the general health conditions, and to helping people in a scientific protocol to be better without a hospital. But when it's extremely necessary to have a hospital, they do political pressure and juridical and communication pressure for people being attended. So they distribute food, thermometer, oximeter, medicines, psychology support for more than 500 people. So the situation is really terrible here. We want to cry every day, all day long, but women and girls are doing what the government, the enterprises, the big organizations are not doing. So I'm really proud of our work in this terrible context.
You know, Ajoy, you spoke earlier about how amazed you've been by women and what women have done. And I think clearly what Bianca just shared is evidence of that. In the absence
indeed.
of political leadership and in the presence, actually, of, I would say, political violence in Brazil under Bolsonaro's leadership, women have stepped forward to feed our communities, care for our communities. Could you speak about how you have seen kind of similar work through Forward or other organizations that you're engaged in, kind of where there have been not just points of rhetorical optimism, but very much kind of pragmatic optimism because of the ways in which women have organized to help respond to this moment?
I think women were the first to roll their sleeves up and start responding. In terms of organizations like Forward, because we are working closely with communities, we identified the needs very early, especially the needs of the women on the margins, women who are undocumented, who have unstable stay in, for example, the United Kingdom, who were not able to go to work, who were living, on the breadline. We quickly mobilized, worked with partners on the ground, community-based organizations were able to put in steps to get food to them, vouchers to them, were able to buy data for them to be able to use mobile phones, so on and so forth. And that scenario was replicated all across the United Kingdom. We work with our partners in Tanzania to share information, to share knowledge, to be able to reach out to the community so that communities were able to take steps to protect themselves. And again, this is one example of us working together, because unless we are able to work together, we will not overcome this virus. My real fear is a lot of countries have put huge amounts of money into the COVID response. And I think the austerity that will hit after the vaccines have been, all the vaccines have been dispersed, to try to recoup that money that they've invested, will hit women and girls even harder. Because for a lot of us who are here in the United Kingdom, for example, we work and we remit money home. And studies have shown that, particularly in the UK, some of the remittances, the World Bank says, is as much as overseas development aid that people here remit home. If jobs are lost, if people are not able to go back to work, if people are suffering the effects of long COVID, then all of this will have a ripple effect on communities at home. So I am actually very concerned, not only with the deaths, the suffering, the mental anguish, the violence now, what happens later. I think that is what I am very much concerned about. And
Andrew, I want us to be able to talk about that. And though before we do, I do want to give Winnie the chance to talk about kind of what she, with Teen Seed and other organizations she's working with in Kenya, have been found is possible to help protect girls and women in this time. And I think this is, a really especially important conversation because, as you kind of spoke about earlier, like gender-based violence has exploded everywhere. I mean, it's exploded in the UK, it's exploded in the US, it's exploded across Latin America, across Africa and Asia. And so I think we desperately need to know what can work, so we do know where to invest our time and energies to protect women and girls. And so please, Winnie, I know you are doing some things that thankfully are working to help girls and women who have been hurt and harmed, and also to protect girls and women from hurt and harm. So please, Winnie, anything you can share, we very much welcome.
Sure, thanks. So what we've been able to do, first of all, is to be able to help our community members to get masks, so like train young women on how they can produce locally made masks from like kitenges, materials like this. Because when it started, one single mask was going for more than $1, which is about 150 Kenyan shillings, and then the price kept going down. So for a woman who doesn't even have food on the table, they haven't gone for the casual, so they don't have money, how do you buy a mask? In fact, it was painful for me in the month of late March and April, where you could not even board a matatu, public transport, without a mask. And so this is a woman who's trying to struggle. She's trying to look for some little money to come and feed their kids, but you will not be allowed into public transport because you don't have a mask. Yet it's very ironical. You're trying to get something to do to support your kids. So what we did was to try and train a few women into how they can be able to make masks for their own and distribute that. We also trained them on how to make soaps, because then the sanitizer was super expensive. Like, you cannot even have that conversation. As baking like soap or using jig and other stuff that would help disinfect and also wash hands and be able to just keep living one day at a time. But this was not enough. Women will come to you and they need food. Honestly, like, food was a big issue. People were hungry. People are still hungry right now. And so we worked very hard to try and mobilize food staff from well-wishers and philanthropists. Thanks very much to the people who supported and continue to support. We have even seen, not only in Kiabio or by Teen Seed, but a lot of women leaders at grassroots level, including women human rights defenders, running up and down campaigns, collecting food stuff and distributing to the community members. I know amazing other community leaders who were just trying to feed their communities. This Floor, and I know Rachel, so many others who have worked very hard to feed their communities. But you see, the more you do that, you realize that just a day a meal is not enough. It has to be continuous. We have had women who I have worked with directly opening their doors to accommodate survivors of sexual violence, because you're going to be abused. I mean, security issue is not our issue as women. It's everybody's issue, right? Government must be able to ensure that women are safe at any given time, anywhere, whether you're on the streets or in the bus or in your house. You must be able to run somewhere. Now, we have a government that doesn't have enough funds, doesn't have systems in place in case like a woman is abused, is raped, let's say, or a girl has been defined. Where do they run to? And it's at night. There's curfew that starts at 9 p.m., it was even as early as 7 p.m. And at this time, you're just coming back from hustling, trying to get something. And so we had women that were beaten. Yeah, you're beaten by the cop because the police, you're coming home late and you're wondering, you don't feed me, you don't put food on my table. But, it's continuous violence from all sides. And I see a lot of women who came together to just say, I'm opening my door for anybody who needs refuge. You go to safe houses, they're full. Safe houses which are run by individuals, and they're women. So I have seen an immense way in which women have come together to support each other through this pandemic that I've never seen before. I've also lastly seen women, like at Teen Seed, what we do is during this period, we decided to take some of our young mothers back to school. So there's COVID here, but private tuition, because the cycle of violence, we all understand it. And so it means when you're poor, you're not educated, you don't have money, and you don't have a job. It's everything. You have a small child, yeah, and then so you keep on going through that cycle without an end. So what we did is get like a space where the young mothers can bring their babies and you do take care for them. We support the young mothers with a stipend so they can be able to go to school and get more education, so that during this COVID, you haven't lost everything. At least you gained something. You gained an education. And I'm very, very glad that this year, some of them have registered for the national education. They're doing the high school education. And that also means that you continue to grow, you continue to build yourself, and also tomorrow is going to be brighter. Lastly is I have seen, and what we continue to do is taking a few of the girls and young women during this time to train them on basic IT, like this is a computer, this is where you switch on basic skills like how to open up a Google account, an email address. Because what we also saw with COVID is everybody was going tech, all meetings. But you see, it is, as they say with the Sustainable Development Goals, that we shouldn't leave anyone behind. But we have already left a whole bunch of behind. We are in tech. I am very honored right now that I can be on this conversation, that at least I can be here. But there are many, many thousands of young women or even women human rights defenders who cannot afford even internet bundle. They cannot be able to be part of these conversations. Why? In my view, this is discrimination. And this is really an injustice that of all the more than 200 young mothers who are in our program, you'll only find 2 who have smartphones. All the adolescent girls that are in our program, and I'm talking about 150 girls, none of them have access to internet. So tell me, even as a woman, I'm like, no, it doesn't work like this. So we look like we are responding to it. We look like we're doing something. But the truth is, in some of the communities we work, like the informal settlement and some of the rural areas, is women still do not have access to internet. Not even internet, let's start. They don't have access to smartphones. They don't have access to a computer. They do not know how to even operate a computer. So I'm happy that during this period of time, we were able to empower some of them in this and also open up a place where they can be able to drop their kids and go hustle. So we take care of them, literally, because there's no way you can be able to carry your child, you're hungry, you're trying to look for a job, it's not there, and you get frustrated. And just in addition to what Adoa said, early mental health, you are a survivor of violence, you don't have a job, you're going hungry, you everything is just crumbling, and then you're invited to say a Zoom meeting or an online meeting, and it just looks like a big stone that have been thrown on your face. Like, okay, do I even exist? But I'm very happy for all the programs, all the women leaders, especially the human rights defenders, who stood firm with their community members and mobilized resources, mobilized food to just help them see another day. That still happens even now, and we hope that tomorrow is going to be better.
And Bianca, just listening to Winnie talk about kind of what she hopes will be able to continue as we hopefully, move to vaccinate people across the world, and over the next year, hopefully, do that in an equitable and an efficient manner, and are able to kind of move forward from COVID-19. In Brazil, how do you hope, or what do you think has to happen to ensure that girls and women are not an afterthought in recovery from COVID-19, and actually are central, hopefully, to recovery from COVID-19?
Thank you for this question. And for answering this, I'd like to tell you the story of a girl, a Black human, lesbian. She's 23 years old, I think now, called Deborah Diaz. Because telling you about Deborah, I can answer what I see for with hope to the future. Deborah, she was one student of this centers, these education centers at UNAF. And because of this, she went to the university and now she studies social science. But last year, during pandemics, Deborah was elected as a council woman in a collective mandate. And as you know, Brazil have not Black women in politics. When we have women in this place, you know what happens? Like Marielle Franco, she was murdered. And Black women in politics are also in violence cases. This is really hard for us because we cannot be in this place. And when we are victims of the terrible violences you can imagine. But talking about Deborah, and she is doing a great job with another 2 Black women and 3 men in a collective mandate. In Congress in Brazil, we Black women are less than 200% of all places in the Congress. But Black women, we are 25% of the population. Here in São Paulo, the city where I am, we have 50 chairs at the municipal chamber, but only 4 are occupied for Black women. So for us, it's really important to be in our community organizations, but also it's important to occupy another places, in places of power. So Débora Dias, Elaine Mineiro, Samara Sóstenes, they are in the chamber in São Paulo now. They prove us that we can do that it's really hard. But with our communitarian organization, we can give people food, we can teach what's necessary for education, but we can also promote solutions in public policies. For example, we like very much a music called Ya Masemba, and if you can search later, Maria Bethânia is a popular singer in Brazil, and she sings that music. And there's one part that Bethânia sings: I will learn to read, to teach my comrades. Em português is vou aprender a ler para ensinar meus camaradas. So I think this is really important for us. We have to take these difficult times of pandemics for producing this cycle that put young women and girls in different places. Because if we can take care of people in our houses, in our communities, we can do this in all spaces.
Well, thank you so much, Bianca. Clearly, who is elected to office really matters. I mean, we have lived through the last year in which that has been so painfully true, right? Who is in our city councils, our state or our provincial leadership, and certainly who is at the national level really matters. It matters every day. It especially matters, though, in a moment of crisis. I know we only have a couple of minutes left, but Adjo, I do want to return to you because you spoke about your concern that I share, that this kind of time over the last few months, especially around kind of mass vaccination efforts, will be kind of seen as an expense instead of as an investment. And so from your perspective in the United Kingdom and also in the different communities where Forward works, how do you see kind of ensuring that women and girls are central to the recovery efforts in a purposeful sense and also to avoid unintended consequences?
When I was in school in Ghana, one of our founders, Kweja Agre, had this saying attributed to him: when you educate a man, you educate an individual. When you educate a woman, you educate a nation. And I think this is very true. If we don't harness the power, the intellect, the passion, the knowledge, the strength of women and girls, we are going to lose out. Not only will we lose out at the community level, we will lose out at the national level and the world level. We all have to work together. And it is imperative that we do this. How are we going to do it? That's a very difficult question. But I think it's about recognizing and acknowledging the worth and the contribution of women and girls, because there are a lot of young women and girls who are also taking action in their own way to turn the world and make the world better. We need to have a vision of a brighter, and Winnie has said it, I've listened to her. Every time she says a better tomorrow, a better tomorrow. And we need to have that collective vision of what that better tomorrow looks like. And that better tomorrow must be about equity and justice. And that must mean equality for everyone. And it means all of us working together to pull ourselves out. It's about being caring, it's about sharing, it's about looking beyond the individual to the whole. Sorry, I'm getting...
No, I agree emphatically. I think it's certainly, and so does Bianca. I think certainly, we have to ensure that women and girls are educated, are protected, are empowered, supported, and are given the authorship of the future. Are given kind of the agency in politics, in community organizations, in arts and culture, in front of a classroom or a boardroom. Exactly. And so I certainly hope that for anyone who is joining us, you will be part of that work. And if you want to support the work of these three extraordinary women, I hope that you will reach out to them and to their organizations after our time together to determine how best to do just that. Thank you to our extraordinary panelists. And again, thank you to my dear friend Kennedy for bringing us all together today. And we hope that all of you stay very safe. Thank you very much.
Sexual violence is a global pandemic, yet we treat it like it doesn't exist. Like the people who experience it don't matter and their feelings are not important. This underreporting and undercommunication has made the issue invisible, and the official statistics do not reflect the true nature and size of the problem. In December 2012, something happened that shook the country. A 23-year-old woman and her friend boarded a private bus. On that bus, there were 6 other men who, during that journey, beat her male friend up and then gang raped her. They inserted metal rods into her body, pulled out her intestines, and dumped her on the side of the road. She ultimately died of her injuries. It took something like this, which was so brutal in nature, to force the conversation of sexual violence in the public domain. So many people wanted change. I wanted to do something too, and that's why I started Safe City. To me, the biggest problem was that women were not sharing their experiences of sexual violence for fear of bringing shame to themselves and their families. So Safe City was created as a safe space where women and girls could share their stories anonymously. These stories are then collated as location-based trends, which we could then visualize on a map as hotspots and put out into the public domain. Women could use the same information to make better choices for their own safety. This is a new data set that the police don't have. We presented it to them and they changed their beat patrol timings, and that actually dropped the crime rate. Ultimately, sexual violence is a societal issue, and we need men and boys to be part of the solution. The more stories we get, the more change we can make. Helping to make every city a safe city. If you want to partner with us and use Safe City in your own community, do get in touch. It's a free global app and you can use it very easily. Thank you.
Hi, it's great to be with everyone here for this World Communities Forum. I think this is the inaugural event, and I really want to thank Shafko and Kennedy Odede for helping bring us all together. I'm excited to meet all of you and get into this conversation about how leaders around the globe are responding in this moment as community organizers and leaders, and how this is impacting grassroots work and inspiring a whole new generation of folks. I'm going to do a quick intro of our panelists today, and then let each of them tell you more about themselves. So I'll start with Nsé Ufot, who's in Atlanta, coming to us from Atlanta, Georgia. Georgia is a state that anyone who's following the national news in the U.S. knows is a critical place for organizing and voter engagement. And she leads the New Georgia Project and the New Georgia Project Action Fund. So you'll be hearing from her. Then Eugene Young from Wilmington, Delaware, which is also an important state because I think President Biden is the first president ever to come from Delaware, but Eugene, you can tell us more about that. He leads a metropolitan urban league there in Wilmington. And then all the way from West Point, Liberia, we are excited to be joined by Nellie Cooper, who leads the West Point Women for Health and Development organization that's working to end gender-based violence and oppression. And so I thank you all for joining us today. Each of you have such distinct experiences, and I know our audience is going to be excited to learn from you. So what I thought I'd do is just kick it over to you, and we'll start with Eugene. Introduce yourself, tell a little bit about what you do, and then I would love to just hear how you became a community leader and what is your passion? So Eugene, we'll start with you.
Sure. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I'm truly honored to be here on the panel with such amazing women, and also as you as a moderator is just incredible in itself. So thank you. Also special thank you to Shafko and Kennedy for putting this together, and the team. So again, my name is Eugene Young. I am from Wilmington, Delaware, and yes, Joe Biden is the first president to come out of Delaware, so that's pretty exciting. Small state as we are, less than 1 million people. The joke is we have more chickens than people in our state, which is actually a fun fact about Delaware. But I head the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League, and I'm the co-founder of a grassroots organization called Network Delaware. We focus around getting people involved, engaged on the aspect of policy, and issues that will impact them and their communities. The Urban League is a well-known civil rights organization throughout the state. There's 90 other affiliates throughout the country of the United States. And in that role at the Urban League, we focus on policy, research, advocacy around issues that matter most to Delawareans. For me, it is really, when I think about leadership, it always comes back to one of my favorite quotes by Dr. Cornel West, who says, "You can't lead without loving, you can't save without serving. So what's the depth of your love and what's the quality of your service," right? And so for me, it goes with this idea of first love, right? That love for me came from my family, my parents, Diane and Eugene Young Sr. And so that is a part that pushes me in order to work with people, help others, and just a wanting a better of community, right? And then the idea of service and that quality of service, that has been something that I've seen throughout my life in my family and also in my neighborhood as people served me and were mentors and poured into my cup. And I look at this moment in time right now as a time where we all must work, assist, and serve others as we move forward. And that's really my passion, is being of service to the community that's given me so much. And that's why I'm thankful here, and I'm thankful to talk with you all about how we're all working together and things that we're doing individually to be of service.
Awesome. Well, welcome. I love that idea of love and service. Okay, Ensei, we'll go south to Georgia. What's going on?
Hello, I'm thrilled to be here. Ensei Ufad, I'm the CEO of New Georgia Project, and we are probably best known for doing large-scale civic engagement projects, civic engagement voter registration campaigns. We've registered over 500,000 Black and Brown people just in the state of Georgia alone, and in all 159 of Georgia's counties, and really trying to have this conversation in our state, but also nationally, that there aren't really red states and blue states, right? That there are places where people's votes are suppressed. There are places where people are ignored, where people have been disenfranchised and disincentivized from participating in public life and and in elections as a way to bring about the change that they want to see. And so we are community organizers. I jokingly say that we are basically a tech startup inside of a civil rights and voting rights organization. We build our own technology. We build our own video games, working to try to change the culture of politics and elections and who participates and who runs and who wins. And so just to peel back the layers and demystify it and to talk about, again, you talk about love and service, we talk about love and power, right? Mm-hmm. Who has it, who doesn't, how much we need in order to bring about the changes that we want to see. And that's why I do what I do. I'm passionate about sort of people power. I'm passionate about sort of family and wellness and community and the idea that there is more than enough, and that some people are just really, really greedy. And good at hoarding. I would also learn that today I learned that people from Delaware are called Delawareans, and I feel smarter and richer for that knowledge. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, and I think if there's ever been a time to really understand equity and inequity, is certainly during this time of COVID, which we're going to get into a bit about how your organizing has changed. Oh, bummer. We just lost Nellie for a minute. I know as she's beaming in from Liberia, technology is an issue. So we'll give her a minute here and see if she can join us back. Okay. There she is.
There she is.
Great. Nellie, just in time. So welcome, Nellie. Tell us a little bit about you and what your passion is and how you got into community organizing.
I'm Nellie Cooper. I'm the director for West Point With Me for Health and Development Organization. An organization I've been working to help women and children who were abused during the war and now. It's an organization that is working to help the community of West Point to be able to have a voice in the country and in the area that we work, for government, for others to hear our word, to know about our work and to hear our voice, and know whatever we are doing, that we are working for a community that is being marginalized, a community that have been there, people don't even care for, a community that people feel that is not a place that people could live. So we find ourselves working within this community. We are living in a community that is overpopulated, congested, and yet still people are not leaving from the community. All along, government has tried to move people from West Point to go into other communities, but West Point is just an area that is being congested. And I tell you, West Point is a place that is very close to the capital of Monrovia, and there is a place that accommodates very poor people. So most of the people living in West Point, they are being very poor. some came from the hinterland of Liberia. They came, and the first place they reside is to reside in Monrovia. And because of that, coming to Monrovia, you have to come into West Point. Most of them come into West Point, and then they find it very easy for them to have access to the capital. So this is something that has made West Point to be very overpopulated. And because of that, we work within this community because it is violence oriented. It's a community that have more violence, you have abuses, most especially on women and girls, and then you have child abuse. So we find ourselves within this community working. So we work against gender-based violence. We also work to empower women to be able to have a voice and to be able to participate in the decision-making process of the country, both locally and nationally. So this is where I found myself working. And we work within several thematic areas because the community have several needs. So we find ourselves working in several needs of the community. We have a whole lot going on. During the COVID-19 period, we have a whole lot of things going on because we couldn't close our office. People were coming to us when COVID-19, when the government had the mandate for people to stay at home. People came to us because they felt that we are the ones that we can reach to, first. So this is what I found myself doing.
Well, the women of your country are enormously strong, and so it's exciting to have you as part of this conversation. And I think you touched on one of the questions that really this global forum wanted to sort of illuminate, which is how has the work that you do changed as a result of COVID? And I know as organizers, a lot of us are used to being, in the streets, in the communities, knocking on doors, being in person. And of course, in the last year, folks have had to change that. And also, as we know, COVID has exposed, for some people for the first time, the enormous inequities in society, and especially as we even think about turning the corner. So I'm curious, it's such a massive topic. Maybe each of you could talk about one thing that you've done in your work this year that you think has been a sort of surprise in terms of how you've shifted your community organizing work, and what you would want other folks around the world that are listening to you today to take from that, and also what you would like philanthropists who are investing in some of this work to know from your point of view. So maybe we'll just go back in the order that we started. That's okay, just to make it simple.
Sure. So for us, I'll give my one thing. One of the things that we've kind of shifted because of COVID is we're still doing one-on-ones. A major part of organizing is those one-on-ones, right? And one of the things that we find is that we can still do those one-on-ones digitally, right? So we can still have instead of connecting with someone at a local library, local coffee shop, whatever the case may be, we can still connect with people digitally, and you can probably even meet with more people, right, digitally than you could before when you had to go to the actual geographic locations. But another thing that we've started doing, we just had a group of individuals knocking doors around housing issues over the weekend. We're going out now, knocking on doors, because a part of it is just, you got to meet people where they are, regardless of what's going on. And don't get me wrong, we still have the proper PPE and materials that are needed. But it's all about engaging with people, because one of the big issues that we have is that not too many people have access to broadband access and are able to jump on phones. We have a lot of mothers and grandmothers and fathers who are in the community that may not have the service that may be needed. And so we cannot expect for individuals to just to be able to work online. So we do a lot of going to where they are and hearing about what the issues are going on within our community. And more importantly, working with them within that group so that they're able to advocate for issues within their specific community. It's not paternalistic of us telling individuals what they need to work on, but it's more of us assisting them along in their process as someone has an issue around clean drinking water, our job is to work with them and assist them along that process and use what other methods, resources in order for them to do just that.
I'm glad you raised this, the issue of technology and a technology divide and how that's impacting work. I mean, not only based on income, but obviously generation. They're just, it's a new opportunity, but it's also a new challenge. I would love to know what you found in Atlanta, in Georgia. I know that so much organizing politically this year went off the doors, but obviously you had enormous successes there in frankly mobilizing historic numbers of folks to participate in the elections.
Right. Well, I mean, I would say one, nothing focuses the mind like the credible threat of death, unfortunately. And that is what people were faced with and are dealing with across the globe. I mean, I know that we often cite the numbers of the ones who are no longer with us in the US, but it's a global phenomenon. And a year ago around this time, there was no idea what was happening, what was going on, how long we would be quarantining, et cetera. And so I knew that our commitment to the communities that we organize in was a permanent, that was a constant. And so at this moment, and this is also a message for philanthropy, is that we were experimental and entrepreneurial. Right. And that is often not two adjectives that are used to describe community work, community organizing, nonprofit work, work that regularly gets funded. But that's what we did. And one of the things that I'm super pumped about or excited about is, our commitment to the communities that we organize in remain the same. We had huge plans. We were going to go to every college campus, every dorm move in and move out day to register people to vote, every county fair. Like, we were going to judge your hog if we had to get you to register to vote. And none of that was available to us. But we said, well, where are our people in this moment? And we found that the 17 and a half, 18, 19-year-olds that we wanted to continue to engage with were on this platform called Twitch, which is like, YouTube for gamers, if you will. So we started an activation called Twitch the Vote. On National Voter Registration Day in the US, we ended up registering 9,000 young people to vote in one day. Sorry, that's my dog, my amen corner. And Twitch the Vote on Election Day, we had 500,000 unique viewers coming into our live stream. We had young people, first-time voters, telling their story, acting as correspondents, and people really sort of sharing in this moment. We had live performances. It was fantastic. But again, it was a way to continue to have high quality conversations with the people that we organize with. It was still a way to improve our messaging, to do focus groups, like do all of the things that we would have done if outside were open, as my staff likes to say, and try to shift in the virtual world. But, again, being experimental and entrepreneurial and just trying to figure out how to maintain authentic connections with the people that we communicate with. So our goals did not change, but the tactics that we used to get there did.
Those are a couple of, I'm really glad you raised and say the needing to be entrepreneurial, try new things, which again, and I think that is a good message for the philanthropic community, that this is the time to experiment and invest in new ideas, because the world is changing faster sometimes than the mechanisms for funding. And also maybe when we get into other just sort of suggestions and advice you have for the world, how we actually close this digital divide, is that really something that we should be focusing on? And Eugene, you probably have some thoughts there based on what you're doing in Delaware. Nellie, for you, obviously your work is very community-based, and it would be instructive for us to know, how has COVID and this pandemic changed, if there's a lesson for you in the work that you're doing with women which I know a lot of is about advising them of their rights, empowering them to have agency. So what could you teach us?
Okay. Should I start now?
Go ahead.
Okay, for the Western women, you know that we have worked with several women even outside of West Point. So many of the women, many of our members and even non-members that come and go, there are people who have been affected during the COVID-19. Many of the people are petty sellers. They sell in the market. And I'm telling you that majority of them lost their businesses because when COVID-19 came, there are people who we call a for hand to mouth. It's like you have to sell before you eat. So they have to go in the market to go and sell. And when they go to the market, they were being beaten from off the market because the place was congested when COVID-19 was hit Liberia. So it was like something that was very, very much complicated for the women in Liberia, especially in West Point, because the market, the biggest market is in West Point. Watertown market is right to West Point. So we were so much affected in a way that many of the women lost their businesses, they lost their livelihood, and they even lost, every other thing that they think they could have to be able to sustain themselves. So these women, what we did was to be able to look up to other donors, to donors who we see or partners that could come in to come and help. So we reached out to many of those partners, organizations, and what they did was Queen to Queen was able to give us something for the Swedish organization, women organization were able to give us some little funding so we can be able to give a first hand relief to most of the women that were affected. So it was like a drop in the ocean because reaching out to 200 persons was like a drop in the ocean. So we also reached out to another organization, which other organization, but then the organization that we want to respond was Oxfam and Global Fund for Women. So Oxfam came in and what they did was they gave some relief by giving some full cash and cash for COVID-19, yes, those who were affected so that they can buy food and some essential items that they need. So what the women did was when they got the money, they were able to purchase some needed items that they needed like food, but then they used part of the money for them to be able to get back into business. So that was something that was here. It was very interesting. And majority of the women, in fact, almost all of them, they didn't have phone, phone for them to reach out. So also I was able to provide phone for them. And then Global Fund, we also asked Global Fund, can you help us? And Global Fund came in to help about 20 women to be able to also have, some relief to get back into business. So what we did was we trained those 20 women into business. Then Oxfam to train about 150 to 200 women, and we're able to have the women get back into business. But it's not just easy. Even though some other women are into business because their friends were able to help them. So what we did was to make sure that those women now who have gotten into business and gotten the business training, they are also helping other women who need to know how to be able to get back into business. So we told them each one teach one. Each one teach one. So they're like this person get their training and then how to be a retain their own business so that they can get out of business again. And I'm telling you, those kind of businesses, they are very little business. It's like a small table market that they have to do so that they can sustain their family. And most of them have a success story. Some of them are coming back to tell us, oh yes, what you did for us, we are back in the business and we have added some value to our businesses. So now we are doing this, we are getting some level of profit. So it's like a success story for the women that we have worked with. But even that, we have several women who are still out of business and we are encouraging them to be able to, we are looking for means for them to access loans from other saving clubs or saving institutions so that they can get back into business.
That is a story. So thank you. I think that the idea of partnerships, and also how do you invest in folks who are closest to the economic, devastation that is happening, particularly for folks already, folks of low incomes, folks who are small business owners. And so maybe what we could do is to shift this. I'd like to actually ask each of you a specific question, because one of the challenges for us as organizers is, how do we, once we get out of this pandemic, assuming we do at some point, and as the vaccines become more available, we don't want to just go back to where things were, because as we all know, a lot of inequity existed before this. And so I would love to know, Eugene, and as you're thinking about what's happening in Delaware, I know the Urban League has been very focused on service, sort of what we think of this huge disparity for service workers who've been hugely impacted, who are already the lowest paid. We just saw in the United States a refusal to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. How do we learn from what take what we have seen, what has been exposed to some people for the first time, and how do we try to rebuild and think of our organizing with a sort of a bigger North Star? And how are you thinking about that in Delaware in your organizing?
So we're here in Delaware is interesting because you're 100% correct. This is only shine a light on some of the issues that have been going on within our communities for years now, right? We have so many Black businesses and Latino businesses that are gone and will never come back. We have already, we're seeing like the mortality rates of Black and Latino is astronomical and compared to their white counterparts. So one of the things that we've noticed in our state is a lot more people are wanting to become organizers because of this, right? They're wanting to get involved and engaged, because essentially organizing boils down to two things, right? It's about power, and it is also about resources, right? You're organizing, you're creating power within your community, and you're fighting for specific resources, may that be around the education system, criminal justice, whatever the case may be. One of the things that I think we're doing is, we already have within this combination of these two organizations, we have what we call like this ecosystem of community leadership, right? And so within this ecosystem, you have everything from, we have a fellowship program that we call the Gilliam Fellows, where people come in and they learn. I love what was said earlier about mystification, like we're demystifying this aspect of those who have and those who have not. And I can't connect or talk to anyone about what's going on within my community, right? We're teaching people who to talk, who holds the levers of power within your state. How do you connect with them? How do you pressure them, right? We've also created the Ella Baker Black Organizers, where we specifically focus on training people to organize within communities. We also have issue campaigns that what I think is becoming the heartbeat of the work that we do, because our issue campaigns focus in on what is important to you in your specific community. So if I am in Southern Delaware, and there's certain areas in Southern Delaware that have had issues with drinking water, with quality drinking water, I can create an issue campaign, and we will come in. We're not going to come in paternalistically and tell you what to do or how to do it. We're going to help train you so that you're able to go and do what needs to be done. We'll help you troubleshoot. So we have 5 issue campaigns focused on everything from housing, which is a major issue right now, the instability for housing for many individuals, to we have an organization, issue campaign called Black Mothers in Power, that focuses specifically on Black maternal issues that are going on within our state. So these are the things that we are pretty much focusing in on and doubling down on, as we believe more people, as we see more people are coming in, want to get involved, engaged. Our goal is, how do we connect you through this ecosystem somewhere where you feel as though you can be trained up, and not training up by just some workshops, but true troubleshooting, mentorship, coaching, so that you're able to not only become a good organizer, but train others to do the same as well.
Yeah, it's so inspiring what you're doing, and this idea of building power at the community level. And I know much of your writing is about this, the importance of we can't shy away from talking about how we change power structures. And I one of the things I have seen, and I'm curious as we're finishing our conversation today, is just one of the benefits, of course, of moving to a more digital way of communication is lifting voices of folks who have not been heard, and challenging that whole ecosphere. And I think you're doing that in Wilmington in such an important way. This whole idea of building power and is, of course, so germane to what you're doing in Georgia. For folks who don't follow what's happening in the United States, Georgia has now become the state everyone wants to replicate in their own state in terms of voter empowerment and engagement. It has also led to, as we know, and certainly even just in the last few days, enormous pushback from the entrenched power structure in Georgia. So how are you dealing with, as we think about post-COVID, how do you deal with your success? Because, of course, any success brings the reaction, and it's very much on display in your state.
Yeah, I mean, we are in, listen, what they say, don't read your own press. And I mean, that's certainly how we've been conducting ourselves, but also it's just not hard to not get caught up, because there was an immediate and swift and severe backlash to this sort of multiracial, multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-generational, progressive majority that we have built in the Deep South. There's something fundamental, it feels, about it that is scaring the defenders of the status quo. That, again, it's not just Black voters, that it's a multiracial effort, and that we are organizers and have an eye towards building power and building infrastructure to be able to win and then defend those wins beyond one election cycle. That it's really easy to marginalize or neutralize or take out an individual leader. And I know that, we are prone or primed to want to have an individual superhero, like, who is it that saved Georgia? Who is it that saved democracy? But the truth of the matter is that there is an ecosystem, you will continue to hear that word, that is built of movement organizations, repro organizations, economic justice organizations, all throwing down together to build the power that we seek. And so, one, it's not one of us, so that's how we deal with it, that we share this credit is awesome. I think two is that we delivered Georgia its first Black United States Senator, its first Jewish United States Senator. And we had 90 minutes to celebrate before people were breaking into the US Capitol to try to stop the Electoral College vote. And so the world moved on quickly to start focusing on the Capitol insurrection. And then there are these forced demands and calls for unity. And so it's not pretty hard. And then immediately after that, 80 bills dropped in Georgia that are designed to make it more difficult for people to vote in this moment. And so, this is one step forward and like 10 steps back, but we're stronger and smarter and faster and more strategic, and there are more of us. And so we're going to be able to navigate it. But yeah, there was a severe backlash to the progress that's being made. And I don't think that is unique to us in Georgia. I imagine that all of us have stories about doing good work and how, and then the enemies of progress responding awfully as a result of it.
Right. I mean, it's exhilarating, and it's also, you are on the front lines. And again, for those who have been trying to follow what's happening in the United States, it was a perfect example of how grassroots organizing really pushes the agenda nationally. Recently the House of Representatives passed a massive bill on voting enfranchisement to counteract this. And so all of that is really based on the work that's been happening at the local level. And I love that you shout out your sisters and brother organizations, because you're right. None of this, the beauty of community organizing when it's done well is that we bring others along and we learn from each other, which is what I hope I know this short time we have together is just a little microcosm of how we can all learn to use what we've take the lessons from the successes and the real challenges, honestly, as grassroots organizers. Nellie, maybe I'd be interested in your thoughts based on what also you've heard from your co-panelists here, because I know building women's power for your organization is really important, and some of it's at the individual level. And but how this moment when women are kind of on the move and beginning to feel their power. What's a lesson that you can give us from your experience in Liberia, organizing women as a powerful force?
Yeah, for looking at women being organized as a powerful force in Liberia is something that is very, very much, I can say, interesting, and it's very much something that we are happy about, because with all what's going on in Liberia, women still have the powerful voice to speak. When women speak, people listen because of what we did during the war. When men were being hidden under the bed, they were hiding from the French men, and then you found out that the women were the ones that were winning the bread for the entire family. So now women have raising up and said, look, enough is enough. We cannot accept this kind of thing going on. We are not going to accept this kind of thing. We are not going to accept this. So it's like men are not listening to women, but it's also very much difficult when it comes to the men taking up the space. And right now, many men have taken up the space for the women in Liberia. So it's seemingly little bit difficult for women to be able to reach that space that we had before. So what we are doing is we are organizing. We have women organizing. We form networks, and we work with the existing networks and other organizations, collaborating organizations, to be able to speak as a national voice. But at the community level, at West Point has a climate change problem, where you will find out that the Atlantic Ocean is eating up West Point. And at the same time, we do have safe drinking water in West Point. But all of those issues, there are issues that we as West Point Women for Health and Development Organization helping people to understand that even though we have this problem, but we can still move on, we can make it. What you have to do is to make sure that you have safe drinking water by buying your own safe drinking water, while we're advocating with government to provide safe drinking water within the community. And just recently, we had people coming from the Water and Sewer Corporation telling us that they need what they can do for us, even though we have been advocating. But what they can do is to be able to make the well that we have, part of the wells in West Point, safe. But how can you make a well that is salty? You have a salty water safe. So we are saying that we still need well-born drinking water in our community. And apart from that, we are telling women, buy your water, make it safe, and then you can chlorinate the water and make your water safe. We have water gas. So people at least can afford to buy water gas. So many people will go and buy the pipe-borne water from other communities that are closer and be able to make sure that they keep it safe so that they and the family can be okay. And because of that, we have this issue of outbreak of cholera. It is no more because of the education that we are giving to women to be able to keep their water safe.
That's a perfect example. And I think, and say, even as you said, like when people are facing just survival, it is very hard to begin to focus on other things like voting and building political power and all this. So all of this work, it's all critical to making our communities safe and bringing people together to solve what are just again, have been, to Eugene's point, massive problems forever. But finally, there is a bit of a light shine on. Okay, I'm getting the cue that we only have a few minutes left, and so I'm gonna. This is like kind of rapid fire. I know that part of the idea for all of this, this fabulous World Community Forum, was like, if we were at Davos, what would we be saying? And I love that kind of construct. Or if you were speaking to the massive philanthropic community that is concerned about what's happening. So I would just say, for each of you, you get a minute to say, what would be your number one demand that you would want the global development agenda or development community to address? And it could be what you feel like you need or what you've learned that the community needs, because you all are making the change we need to see in this world. And so I think we'll just go backwards. So Nellie, I'll start with you. 1 minute of what you want to be on the global agenda, development agenda, when all the big people get together and talk about the world.
Well, one of the main things is that women and girls education is very much essential. It's important because when women learn, the entire nation learns. So for it to be on the agenda is one of the things that we want the global community to be able to think about. And because when women are educated, they will know their rights. They will know how to be able to speak about their rights. Because many of the women in Liberia, they are semi-literate, and some of them are not literate at all. So it's something that we really want women to be literate, to know how to speak about their rights. And thanks to Disney Wooster, they have brought some level of relief to some of the women, because we have our literacy classes and women are attending. So that is something that is very, very much important to us. And we really love that. And some of the thing is, violence against women is very, very much bad. It's something that we want it to be eliminated. People say it can be stopped, but if the global community put their hands together and try to help women, to be able to speak up more and more, you will find out that violence will decrease. And then women will have more voice. And I'm sure if there are many men out there who don't want to hear about this, because they feel that men should always be in control of everything when it comes to the family and to women issues. So they want to tell you that we will see about that, and then they are not saying anything, they are not doing anything about it. So we want people to understand that women need to be violence free. We don't want no violence in our homes. We want people to understand the law should be able to back up, because in Liberia the law is very slow when it comes to fighting violent cases. Sometimes when you go, you get so tired because the justice system is so slow. So you have putting up your energy, you have putting in your energy, you have done some other work to work around it so that you can have justice, and then you look at justice cannot be in the far-fetched. So it's like something that you get tired of. So we want the world community to be able to say something to Liberia, to our government, and tell them, look, you need to fast-track cases that involve violence in Liberia. So when those things happen, you will find out that women issues will be, trashed out, especially when it comes to violence against women.
Yep. Thank you. And thank you for your work. So invest in women and girls and their education, and it leads to so much more. Okay. And say, what's your best shot here?
Okay. Here's my big idea. I think that there should be sort of a global framework that is adopted by nations, nation states, multiple large corporations around reparations, and what it looks like to address grievous harm that has been visited upon populations throughout the history of the world. So if we're talking about chattel slavery, if we're talking about the Holocaust, if we're talking about gender-based violence in times of war and outside times of war, that when the peace comes and it has been settled, we need to figure out how to right those wrongs, how to address that harm. I come from an organizing tradition that says that you cannot fix what you have not faced, right? And so thinking about, is it South Africa style truth and reconciliation commissions or whatever, but how do we address grievous harm that has been visited upon populations, and how do we try to make folks whole?
Okay, that's awesome. As our friend Brian Stevenson said, you can't have a truth and reconciliation process if you actually haven't addressed the truth. And so thank you for laying out your truth. Okay, Eugene, I think you get the last word here.
It's hard to come after these two amazing women. I would double down on what Nellie said. I mean, Asinu said around reparations. Reparations, I think, is critical and important right now. We're seeing the effects of the lack of wealth in many of our communities here in the United States. The median wealth of many of our Black families it's abysmal right now. The light is shining on it and showing that there's a need right now. The second I would say is, well, if you have reparations, we wouldn't need a lot of these other things. But long-term investment, long-term partnerships within organizations. Within our ecosystem here in Delaware, we've been, as I said, we've created organizing groups, created fellowship programs. We have candidate school training. We've been able to, it's not a happenstance that over the last 5 to 6 years, Delaware, a small state of Delaware, has elected more Blacks into their state legislature than any other state in the country. And that's almost twice-fold between us and what's number two. It's because we have a candidate school, a campaign manager school, where we're working with many men and women who've been on the sidelines and who've been sidelined, right? In order to help and explore opportunities of getting involved and getting power. And so these are some of the things that we're doing and that we look forward to, like working with other entities in order to continue this amazing work that we're doing as we try to help communities and more importantly, allow people from opportunities for people from the community to speak for themselves. Ella Baker, I'll close with this. Ella Baker once said, strong people don't need strong leaders. And I think that if we're able to hone in on that and allow more individuals to shine and be able to talk about what's going on within our communities, I think we'll be in a lot better space.
Beautiful. So yeah, leadership development, investing in community leaders who are changing the world, and investing in folks who are going into office, and to the example that was given in Georgia, to places where representation is changing, and it's changing because of work on the grassroots level. The three of you are amazing. I feel so honored to have gotten to spend this just little bit of time. We have to do this again next year, check back in, see how it went. So Nellie, Ense, Eugene, thank you for your work, for being part of this global community, and good luck in changing the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Camille.
Thank you so much.
Lovely to share space with you all.
It was great.
Thank you.
My name is Alfred Sigo from Pwani Youth Network. Today I want to talk about how arts can be used to bring change. Art spaces are spaces whereby young people can utilize for their growth, but they can also use as a platform to help sensitize communities and also create a safe space for young people. We've cemented murals across communities, but we've also done education through different art presentation, like online plays, music, and also the use of media as a strategy to reach community. We find that it's very important for us to disseminate different community messages through art, and also to ensure that community are reached with different formats and formulas that can bring up change. I also want to say that art and creative spaces are very important elements that when utilized well, they can help young people create different community spaces for themselves.
About 8 years ago, I launched Safe City, a crowd map for sexual and gender-based violence. We encourage people to anonymously document their stories so that we can see the patterns and trends emerging from this data by location. One of the places that we had a hotspot emerge was in an urban village in Delhi called Lal Kua. It was at a tea stall where men would congregate, drink their tea, and intimidate women and girls passing by with their constant male gaze. When asked what would they like to change about the situation, the women and the girls said that they would want the staring to stop. So we organized an art-based workshop and we helped them paint this huge wall mural with staring eyes. It has many messages both in English and in Hindi that literally challenges the patriarchal behavior. The messages say we will raise our voices, we won't stay silent, we will speak up. We won't be intimidated by your gaze. Look with your heart, not with your eyes, and so on and so forth. These wall murals were so powerful that it actually got the men to stop. And I love this picture because you can see the agency on this girl's face. She looks so confident and she's just 13 years old. But through that paintbrush and this wall mural, which we called a talking wall, she is challenging the behavior. The second wall mural was in Bombay, outside a girls' college. The girls said that they had groups of young men hang around and intimidate them when they were on a break. And so again, we had an art-based workshop where we had conversations about what they were experiencing. And then the girls decided what kind of messaging they wanted to put on these walls. And so they painted that sexual harassment is a crime. They were talking about staring eyes, but also taking pictures without permission. They wanted to talk about rape culture. All these are taboo topics, very hard to discuss. But it was easy for them to talk about it through the walls. And they added a new element. They spoke about consent, but they also added the sections of the Indian Penal Code under which all these inappropriate behaviors were a crime. And during the painting of this wall mural, we had many men stop and ask us what we were doing, and they said that they weren't aware that these were crimes, and they thanked us for it. As you can see, it's very interesting to see how people can take back their agency by not only talking about their feelings through the wall, but also putting information like the Indian Penal Code. This has been used outside public toilets like the one you can see right now in Delhi. The public toilet didn't have proper doors, windows or lighting. On top of that, we had men hang around, take pictures of women whilst they were going about their business, and that was intimidating because they didn't know how those videos or pictures would be used. But taking a stand, even if it is painting, just the act of sharing their feelings and putting it in a public space is very, very powerful.
Madare Roots Initiative is an organization that is operating in the informal settlements of Madare for the last few years. Just around when the first cases of corona were announced here in Kenya, we sat down as a group and we thought, what could we do to sensitize our community against coronavirus? The culture of graffiti is something that is well embedded within our community in Madare. Some of the measures that were being put in place were not very much applicable, like keeping social distance, wearing masks. But we thought maybe through this talking wall, we could sensitize the community and bring the message closer to them. And so far, we've painted up to 20 graffitis, not just speaking about corona, but also speaking about different social issues affecting us here in Madare. I remember when we started, there was a feature about our graffiti on one of the national television here in Kenya, and it gave us widespread publicity. People saw what young people taking initiative to protect themselves and their community against corona. Reception has been very positive, so you see more and more people are taking up the messages because they saw one of the graffitis that we did, and now we've seen what the power of young people can do. When young people come together, they're able to do massive things. We've seen that the uptake of this graffiti, the behavior change, people washing their hands, people putting on their mask and maintaining social distance just because of these simple graffitis that young people decided to do. We will just like to encourage the participant. If you see initiatives being run by young people, please try to support this initiative. It is such initiative that give birth to even greater initiative that come and change the world.
What an amazing day of conversations and content. I hope you agree. I'm honored to have spent time with Ambassador Samantha Power and appreciate her leading her powerful voice to our grassroots efforts. I wish her all the best with her upcoming endeavors. As a proud feminist, I got so much energy from our Power of She conversation. As Chelsea said, the pandemic has impacted women and girls exponentially. The work of leaders like Adua, Winnie, and Bianca is essential as we rebuild together. Winnie's honesty is a brave inspiration to us all. I am all of you, Winnie. Thank you, Adua, Bianca, and Winnie, for sharing your stories and your work with us. And thank you to my friend, Chelsea, for leading that important conversation. We will be digging further into the power of she through some of our collaborative workshops. So if you haven't signed up yet, please do so via the chat at the end of the day. Wow, the spotlights. Our spotlights are designed to show you the innovations coming out of our communities on the ground. The Safety City app could be used all around the world. What an impressive innovation. How cool was the community art we saw from all over the world? The impact that communicating through art has on our communities is huge. I encourage you to share pictures and comments on your event digital wall, our version of a community mural. Our other big conversation of the day showed us how community leaders have worked to mobilize during pandemic. The impressive results show us that communities hold the power to mobilize. Eugene, Nse, and Nelly are on the front lines, driving that impact, amazing grassroots leaders. And thank you to my friend Cecile for leading that conversation. My friends Nick Christoph of the New York Times and Adrian Poe, the co-founder and executive director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, are going to join me now for a conversation to close out the day one. Following our conversation, if you've signed up to one of our important collaborative workshops, click the join button you will see on your screen. If you haven't, please sign up in the chat. And you will help us drive output that will be passed to the Global Alliance for Communities, ensuring that we take the conversation forward in touchable ways. Okay, on that note, we'll see some quick questions pop up on the right side of your screen. Please take a second to answer them for us, as your input is very important. Okay, let me welcome Nick and Ojan. Conversation with Nick and will be interesting. I want to say that thank you for both of us for joining us today. Nick, you have been a dear friend of mine for many years, and your work at the New York Times covering human rights, women's rights and health, and the global affairs has been highlighted some of the most challenging issues around the world. Your work is really special, and I'm so glad you are here with me today. Agent, you know that very well. I'm a huge fan of your work with the National Domestic Workers Alliance and how you are bringing more attention to care workers. I also love your humility. You have cracked the code on raising the voices of underrepresented groups. So having you both with me for a closing reflection on day one is amazing.
Well, I'm honored to be here to chat with you both. I'm a huge admirer of the work that both Kennedy and iGen have done in helping support overlooked groups around the world. And let me maybe start with that. Kennedy, I'm in Oregon right now. Oregon sends its love to Matare and to Nairobi. But how has the pandemic affected the communities that you work with? I'm from the US, frankly. It looks like overlooked groups around the world have become more overlooked, at least from within the US. Is that true, or what has the impact of the pandemic been?
Nick, I was so angry when the expert says that COVID is equalizer. I think they are wrong. It is not. Nick, as you know, we already have inequality existing. And they are being hit with this pandemic, something they don't understand. So in my community where I grew up, and these places whereby people survive through hand to mouth, no health insurance, no double rooms, no fridge where you can keep your food. And then, Nick, you are told like social distancing, wear mask. It was really tough because it was really whereby somebody has to choose between buying $1 mask, it was by then, or buying food. So, Nick, I met this woman who told me, Kennedy, I'd rather die from corona than to die from hunger. You see, so to really put so Nick, to answer the question in short is that it has made the situation even much worse. Yes.
I remember quoting you at that point, at some point over the last year in the New York Times about your point about choosing to die from coronavirus versus from hunger. It's a truly terrible Hobson's choice. Ai-jen, let me ask about the impact of the pandemic on the groups that you work with. On the one hand, it seems to me that in the US, there has been more sort of recognition about some workers being essential, and those aren't the investment bankers. On the other hand, obviously the gaps in income, in mortality have been greater than ever. And so how has the pandemic net affected the groups you work with?
Well, Nick, first, it's great to be in conversation with the two of you. Kennedy, thank you so much for your leadership. It is an inspiration, and these conversations today are so essential. So just thank you. And also thank you, Nick, for the stories you've been telling through the pandemic. It is a huge reason why I do feel hopeful that more people understand the realities of inequality in our world that have been so exacerbated by the pandemic. And I'll just say that going into the pandemic, domestic workers many were already struggling to survive, not unlike the situation that Kennedy describes, where you had people working for poverty wages, already struggling to put food on the table, no job security, no health care, no sick days. And as soon as the stay-at-home orders came down, you saw dramatic losses in jobs and income, to the point where the second week of shutdown, our members were telling us that they were not sure where they were going to get money to put food on the table for their own children. At the same time, we had domestic workers who were working as essential workers on the front lines of the pandemic, making sure that the elderly and people with disabilities were safe in their homes. And meanwhile, their own children were home from school, struggling with online learning and trying to figure out, do I risk my own family's safety and my own safety to continue to work so that I can put food on the table? What are my choices? It was immediately a crisis of impossible choices. And now, even as some people have gone back to work, we're still looking at a 40% unemployment rate. So it is a full-blown depression for domestic workers, and for those who are undocumented in particular, there has been no relief for a year. So it is dire, and at the same time, I will agree that more people are attuned to just how much work in our economy was invisible and undervalued and insecure. And I do think that that is the greatest opening to create change for low-wage workers and the working poor of decades.
And Ai-jen, to follow up on that, I have the sense that in the last year, among some of these low-income workers, that there have been all kinds of increases in problems that we've been largely unaware of because there hasn't been so much visibility, because kids haven't been going to school, because they've been getting fewer doctor's visits. And that it's not as if things can snap back immediately when people return to work, that there will be long-term consequences in we've heard about increases in addiction in some communities, children who've been more traumatized, obviously the malnutrition issues you talked about. Is there a lot going on that we're not seeing that we will pay the price for years to come?
Yes, and I do believe that so much depends on our approach to economic recovery and truly recovery in a holistic sense from this pandemic. And if we look at the multiple dimensions of the crisis, it is a public health crisis. It's also a racial and gender equity crisis and an economic crisis, and the three are woven together. And if we imagine our boldest, bravest strategy for recovery, it is one that has to fundamentally address the inequities that made us so vulnerable to begin with and put marginalized communities at the forefront of how we design our recovery. How do we invest in jobs for vulnerable workers, in raising wages, in expanding our safety net to truly keep everyone safe? These are choices that need to be made in governing out of this pandemic that can have a huge impact in minimizing the threats and the risks that you just named.
Kennedy, as you look back on this year, what are the lessons learned from the pandemic and the pandemic response that can guide us in normal times in terms of elevating some of these voices, elevating some of these issues, getting resources to address these kinds of inequities around the world?
Yes, Nick, if I'm being honest with you, is that people tend not to learn well. Nick, you are much involved with Ebola. So what happened? And I thought the world will be able to learn from there. If you look at it now, Nick, what's happening with this disease, with this virus, and hearing that Canada, developed country, are just choking the vaccine. And people are so proud about America reaching 100 million. It's okay. But they're forgetting that we are in this together. If Kibera is not safe, America is not safe. If developing countries are not getting these vaccines, UK is not safe. So I don't know if we're learning from this, you know what I mean? But it's something that as somebody like you can really raise this issue up, because you can vaccine everyone in America, but this is, in Kenya, for example, Nick, this thing is mutating, it's changing, there are different variants coming up, So I feel like we're not learning sometimes, But what I've seen is the power of the community, resiliency, that nothing really put them down. They keep on jumping up. So what they're looking for is just a little of a hand to hold them, the policy, to hold them back. You know what I mean? So that's how I feel. But I'm really worried with what's happening around the world, how developing countries are becoming selfish. I want them to think something called Ubuntu. You are in because of me. We are in together. Anyway, that's my message, Nick.
And Ijen, is that your sense too, that the once trouble hit the developed world, kind of pulled up the drawbridges and looked inward, and that it's been harder to build this kind of international solidarity precisely when it is most needed?
I would say it depends on where you are looking at the picture from, because I know, for example, within the domestic workers movement, which is growing globally, there was an immediate attempt to coordinate and to support each other's efforts. There are domestic workers who are organizing in over 60 countries around the world and have been working together since 2010. And it is a growing movement, and the sense of solidarity and connection and interdependence there is profound. In the domestic workers movement here in the United States, a lot of people thought that the pandemic would prevent people from getting involved in activism or advocacy, but that it's been the opposite. In fact, our meetings are better attended than ever. Our membership has grown. People are finding strength and resilience in community. And you're seeing beautiful volunteer efforts, like a group of nanny employers in Los Angeles who formed a Vaccine Angels group to help domestic workers get vaccinated as a volunteer group. So everywhere you look in the community, there is, I think, initiative and a desire to reach out and to express the interdependence that Kennedy described. And we have to invest in that and support that also with our policy and the way that we govern. And I think to do that globally is a challenge, but one that we must meet.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned some of that resilience and strength, because I think, we in journalism, frankly, we so often jump up and down about the problems that we don't adequately acknowledge, a backdrop of hope. And so, Kennedy, let me ask about that. Now, you're speaking from Mathare, a slum in Nairobi that has enormous problems. So if you go 100 yards in any direction from where you are right now, what will you find? And not just the problems, what will you find that will give us some sense of that hope, that resilience, that strength that you mentioned?
Yes, Nick. So if I move from this room now, a few yards from here, I will meet women selling vegetables by the roadside. And they're telling you that there's nothing that can stop them. This is really powerful. And what is happening is that the policies that are there don't support them. They have proven that they can survive. And if they can get really friendly policies that care about their small businesses, they can rise. And it's amazing, seeing this. Nothing really puts them down. They keep on rising up. And I get the energy from them when I see them, when I see children playing here, when I see women. And honestly, why I'm really talking to Agent is really powerful, because most of the women in this community are domestic workers. And what I'm happening here is that there's this mentality that now virus is only in the slums. So what does that mean? They don't get jobs anymore. Because here we are not yet vaccinated. We just started it. So it means they're really going through a lot, but they never gave up. So, Agent, I'm so inspired by your story of the domestic workers. So I think they're also here, and they're doing it here informally. They may not have a platform, but they know each other. I remember my mom was a domestic worker and could tell a neighbor, neighbor, where I'm working, they need somebody, please, can we go together with you? So it's just amazing to see how people in the marginalized community are not giving up, and they're striving up every day.
I would just add to that, I think that this era it is true that our realities are defined oftentimes by inequity and injustice, but our communities will never be defined by those realities. Our communities are always going to be resilient and strong and organize and assert their dignity and their agency. And that is, I think, our hope for the future.
And I think one of the things that each of you has done really well is to empower people, to ensure that that agency is filled. And Kennedy had said that you would crack the code on that. Well, Kennedy, you cracked the code on that as well. I think how much Kibera has changed since I first visited Kibera School for Girls a zillion years ago. So there are a lot of folks watching who would like to replicate what each of you has done in some other part of the world. And I'm curious if you could each just give us some lessons learned about how you did crack that code, how you did help support the agency of communities that were neglected or overlooked. Maybe Kennedy, why don't we start with you?
Yes, thank you. I think one thing that Agent will agree, many things, but one thing I know we can agree together is that it was not easy to be where we are. And it was our life experience, what we've seen. And when we kind of made it, we realized that, you know what? It's not about us. These things are happening. We have to organize our communities. We have to bring these issues up. So like my story, growing up in Kibera Slum and starting Shofco as a grassroots movement, there was no funding. I didn't understand how to do the proposal writing. I don't understand to speak their language. You know what I mean? And then, Nick, that's why I'm really doing this conference today, this event, to bring the voices of people on the ground who are really struggling and doing amazing work and are not getting enough funding or visibility. So, and the power for me, Nick, is you can't do anything alone. You need a family. You need a community. When you raise the issue and people join that issues, you see you can't stop the light that's already started moving. I mean, so I feel like the power of believing in people is what really was able to propel us up. You know, I mean, I knew that I can't do it myself. I need communities. And when I did with Shofco, I realized there are many Shofcos around the world that are struggling. So the point is that how can we bring them together? That's why we have what's called World Community Forum that is launching Global Alliance for the Communities.
And Ai-jen, what was your secret to cracking that code?
Oh, there's no secret. It's just people. And for me, I've always really believed in the power of women, women who power so much in our lives and in our communities, and yet whose work and contributions have been so undervalued. The act of bringing power and dignity and respect to the lives and the contributions of women is transformative. And the operating word here, just to build off of what Kennedy said, to me is power. That what we ultimately need to do to create change is to put more power in the hands of everyday people to both shape conditions of their lives and to shape the course of history. And I do believe that in the end, it's everyday people coming together in community, organizing, and their everyday acts of courage that do change the course of history.
You know, I would just note that I've seen a lot of initiatives that have worked and some that have not worked. And one of the characteristics of those that have not succeeded is often they're organized by a bunch of really smart people at a conference room in Washington somewhere. And they don't work because they don't have buy-in. They're not inclusive. It's a bunch of really smart people who are trying to solve a problem somewhere else. And however bright they may be, however well-informed, it's an approach that I think has largely failed over time. And I think both of you, represent a different approach and one that I hugely admire. And so with that, thank you so much to both of you for your insights. Thanks to all of you who have joined us in this conversation. And Kennedy, I'd like to turn it back over to you to finish wrapping up.
Thank you so much, Nick. And one thing I want to talk about you quickly is that you are one of the most brave person people don't know. You are one of the brave. You go to places that are difficult. You are not scared. So you are an amazing man. And thank you so much, Nick. And Ai-jen, thanks for joining us. So today we have lifted the voices of community leaders and their solutions onto a global stage, as we discussed. We are shining a light on what is possible when you let communities drive their agenda. The success of a great reset after the pandemic hinges on the leadership of community-based practitioners, those on the ground, and they are systematically locked out from policy and funding decisions. That has to change. So today and tomorrow, we are advancing towards the goal of ensuring that the voices of community leaders are heard and able to shape the global agenda. I hope to see you all here tomorrow. And I'm honored to be joined by Edgar Villanueva, the renowned expert on social justice philanthropy and author of Decolonizing Wealth. I love that book. That will happen on day 2. To open day 2. We'll have more community spotlights showcasing innovative and impactful solutions. You will get to see an inspiring community health worker, a University of Community Development, and more. We'll also have more big conversations Darren Walker, president of the Ford Foundation, is joining me and two other leaders, Dr. Fala and Glennis, to discuss how we build for a more equitable future. Again, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili leads a conversation with three outstanding grassroots voices. That's my friend for many years in Mathare called George Gachie and Innocent Magavi and Dr. Bakteri, focus on how communities and their leaderships are key to the post-pandemic economic recovery. To wrap day two, I will be joined by Cheryl Dorsey, a trailblazer in the social entrepreneurship movement and president of Econ Green. We've been working together to ensure the momentum we have created today and tomorrow will continue. And last but not least, we have more collaborative workshops. I hope you are joining a workshop today, coming up next. You can click on the link in the chat to join. I want to say again, I'm so excited to see you all tomorrow. Thank you.